This is the story of Kasim Lewis. He tied up and tortured a barmaid and murdered a civil servant when she refused to undress for him. Lewis, who was 31 at the time, abducted Ileana Tudors, who was 22, on Christmas Eve 2017 as she walked across Finsbury Park in North London. He bound her with cable ties in an ordeal lasting at least an hour and a half. The convicted sex attacker forced her to reveal her PIN number, then left her desecrated corpse in a burnt-out shed after cutting her wrist to the bone and slitting her throat. He struck her over the head with a bottle and then used the bottle to cause deep-lying injuries to her back, neck and wrists. Lewis was seen on CCTV just after 10 p.m. at Manor House tube station. He attempted to withdraw £100 from a bank account but could only take out £30 and bought a bottle of brandy. In the days that followed, Lewis asked a friend if he had seen the story in the news about the murder of the barmaid. Ileana was discovered 3 days later, on the 27th of December, after her concerned friends retraced her steps. A post-mortem examination gave the cause of death as a stab wound to the abdomen and a head injury. Lewis was arrested at an address in Dalston on January 1st and charged with murder the next day. Ileana, of Russian and Greek origin, had been working a shift at the World's End pub in Camden that night before heading to the Dover Castle nearby. She agreed to spend the next day at a friend's house for Christmas and was planning on staying the night and heading home first to collect some things. She was spotted at CCTV at 8 p.m. walking across Finsbury Park to her flat in Upper Tollington Park. She had been due to meet with friends in Enfield but never arrived, prompting a police appeal for information. Kasim Lewis was forced to leave his homeland of Montserrat in 1995 after the volcano disaster. He was addicted to drugs and indeed was high on cocaine and cannabis during the attack and was diagnosed as HIV positive in 2003. Lewis was jailed for 2 years for sexual assault and exposure on a bus. He was placed on the sex offenders register in September 2005. He then received a further 8 months in jail for failing to comply with the sex offenders notification requirements and a community order in 2011. At trial, he admitted murder and was sentenced to a minimum of 29 years in prison. The court heard before he left her body, Lewis carved either the Batman logo or the letter M into the middle of her chest. The killer was bisexual who was in a relationship with a man but prowled Finsbury Park to satisfy his craving for casual sex. He had a fascination for sadism and had pornographic film on his phone. Among the trailers was one entitled Bad Teens Punish, where a young woman is chased into an alleyway by a man who says she ain't getting away again. Lewis began amassing his previous convictions in 2002 when he was 15 and sent to a Young Offenders Institute for 18 months for a car theft. In 2005, he was sentenced to 2 years detention for offences of sexual assault and exposure and put on a sex offenders register for life. Lewis had boarded a bus and prodded the woman's bottom through a gap in her seat and she turned to see him performing a sex act. He also had previous convictions for burglary, attempted theft and handling stolen goods. The court heard how Ileana was only 5'1" tall and of slight build. She came to London in 2013 and had worked at Camden Market selling t-shirts featuring characters from Japanese anime cartoons. Since early 2017, she had been working at the World's End and was a well-known and much-liked figure in the area. At the time of the killing, she was living in a bedsit at her house in Upper Tollington Park, not far from Finsbury Park. Lewis later admitted stabbing a retired civil servant to death in her own home just weeks earlier. Catherine Burt, 55, was found bound and gagged at her £700,000 North London home after police responded to concerns about the mother's welfare forced entry on the 16th of November 2017. Originally from Galway, Ireland, Miss Burke had lived at a property in Hill Road, Muswell Hill for around 20 years. Lewis pleaded guilty to her murder. He was further sentenced to this murder and told he must serve a minimum of 40 years prison before he could be eligible for parole.